Hi there. Thanks for coming along to our breakfast event to showcase some of our micro-learning speakers around project and program management. We're not quite ready yet. We're still sorting things out, getting the technology up and running so we can all be ready for you. So in the meantime, have a look at a few of these snippets and it'll give you a bit of a taster as to some of the other micro-learning modules that we've got, some of the speakers we've got coming up in store over the next 12 months. Thanks so much. Talk to you soon. Cheers.
Projects in the OGC world, in MSP and Prince world, exist to deliver outputs. And what do we mean by it? PMI calls them deliverables. It's a thing. Usually it means you can have your photograph taken next to it. You know, you can, if you can tap it, it's an output.
Risks and issues on programs.
So when you've got a whole load of things on your risk register, have a look through them and go, what are the causes that we have? What are the big answers to lots of these things? But it's useful to say, am I looking at an effect or a cause when you're looking at the risk register?
Oh, hi. Yeah, thanks for coming back. We're still getting the cameras ready. We're still getting everyone positioned so we can do the broadcast really well for you. So look, have a look at a few more of these micro-learning snippets. So you get a bit of a taster of what's in store. Again, talk to you soon. Thanks for hanging by. Cheers.
What are the benefits of vaccinating children against flu? Well, presumably it means the kids don't get flu. They can go to school, their exam scores improve, their education improves. They don't give flu to other kids at school. That's good. That's a benefit. It's a measurable improvement. We can measure the amount of days that kids have off school because they do measure it. We can do this stuff.
A team member may say something like, this new project is negatively affecting our team and that's not being taken into consideration at all. So an active listener could respond by reflecting back. What I'm hearing you say is this new project will have negative consequences for your team. So I'm not parroting back, I'm reflecting back what I'm hearing in my own words.
Oh, hi. Thanks very much again for joining us. Now, we're just showing you a few of these snippets, so you've got a bit of a taster of what the micro-learning is all about. We've got a couple of presenters coming up shortly to speak to you. It's all sort of around the micro-learning for project and program managers. So we're still getting the lights all sorted and getting the microphones on and things like that. So just bear with us for a few more moments and you should be good to go, okay? So we'll definitely be seeing you soon. Cheers.
Project, Program and Portfolio Management Maturity Model, P3M3 Maturity Levels.
So at level 1 maturity, which we call awareness, so there's kind of a process awareness, they are kind of the fun places to work, right? Because every project's exciting for them because they've got no idea what's going to happen.
Establishing an enterprise project management office.
One of the key things is spending a lot of time on problem definition, understanding, and obviously the same for projects, right? What are we actually trying to resolve here? Are we all clear? Are we all agreed? It takes a lot of time to do that.
I don't know. Is this the right table? I can't work it out. Look, we're going to be just taking a little bit longer to get this ready. We've got a few cables here that we're not quite sure where they're meant to go. But once we've got those in, we'll be up and running. So look, keep enjoying yourself watching these micro learning snippets. They'll no doubt give you a bit of knowledge around project and program management. So yeah, talk to you soon. Cheers.
Ponder this. We typically divide projects into work packages. We divide programs into projects. There's inevitably an overlap. Should I run a big, complicated project with big, complicated work packages? Or should I run a simple program with specific projects in it? One person's big, complicated work package is another person's simple project. And organizations will make different choices.
Multiple diverse infections.
When they scan your temperature, if it was above 37, something you were a potentially Ebola carrier. Now, the problem is in a country like Sierra Leone, your humidity is hot. We're right in the midst of malaria season. And then you've got huge HIV cases going on as well.
Hi, everybody. Welcome. Kia ora whānau to those in New Zealand. Welcome to the CC Learning networking event where we bring project professionals from the Southern Hemisphere to talk to our Northern Hemisphere cousins and to share ideas, learnings and experiences in project management. Now, in Australia, it's customary to perform an acknowledgement of country to recognise the original people on the land I am broadcasting from. I've adapted it for Brisbane, Queensland and our broadcast. So I acknowledge the I acknowledge the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders people as the first Australians. I recognise their cultures, histories and diversity and their deep connection to the land, water and seas of Queensland and the Torres Strait. I acknowledge the Yagara people and the Turrbal people of the traditional custodians of Meerjin, Brisbane, the lands from which I am broadcasting today. I pay my respects to the Yagara and Turrbal elders past, present and emerging, who pass their culture and knowledge through oral storytelling, song and dance. While there is no dancing or singing planned today, we will use oral storytelling to share with each other the wisdom and knowledge gained from experiences in project management. In that way, we hope to blend our cultures and histories together. I extend a warm welcome to my conversationalists around the world, Martha Tong from Tamariki Makaurau, Auckland, New Zealand, and Simon Castle from Manchester, United Kingdom. I'm broadcasting from Brisbane on a calm, sunny afternoon. I also welcome those worldwide joining online via YouTube and LinkedIn. Now, Martha, what's Auckland? What's happening in Auckland today? Oh, let me transition that.
It's evening and I'm looking forward to my dinner and I'm sitting here looking out at the Sky City Convention Centre right now on a not particularly warm winter's day. I know it's meant to be the hottest year on record, but so far we've got a nice bit of winter right now.
Oh, very nice, very nice. And Simon, how about you? What's happening in Manchester?
It's threatening the look of rain at the moment, so who knows? It might rain as it normally does, or I might get a peak of sunshine. At the moment, it's a bit brighter than over there, I think, at the moment.
I was saying earlier, I think I've got the best time, so it's just 3:30 for me in the afternoon, and you guys are either side of your days, so that's a bit rough for you, but kind of fortuitous for me. Now, let's see. Now we're going to be talking about some interesting topics today. And for those joining us, please ask questions via YouTube or the LinkedIn chat. Remember to subscribe to YouTube and LinkedIn channels for future notifications. And remember to continue the conversation and post messages online in your workplace. It really helps us if you promote the event and let people know about it. We've moved away from our normal morning time slot, so hopefully we can get more people that are awake in New Zealand and Australia, fingers crossed. In May, I was lucky enough to travel to the UK and attend a project management conference in Manchester. While there, I heard from and spoke with Simon about a project he worked on during COVID to set up NHS Nightingale. Basically, these are rapid response centres for those that might be affected by COVID. But I'm going to let Simon give you more information for a few minutes before we have our conversation about what he did. And remember to ask your questions in the chat, and let's talk soon.
Cool, thanks, Scott. So just wanted to talk a little bit about a couple of points that is probably published on the video today. So I want to really look at the message and best practice still work when you're in an environment that's new, that's got some uncertainty to it, and also speak around the themes about adaptability being really the key aspect of the project delivery. And also what kind of things can happen with unforeseen challenges being encountered. So I thought I'd kind of start by saying I'm often asked by clients that I meet in an ad hoc conversation and directors from project management industries that might be new to that industry. They might be kind of from a science-based background, and they just want to talk to me about project management. And often what they ask me straight away is, do I know what agile is, or am I, aware of the word waterfall? And kind of each time I hear this, I kind of, revert back to my bias, which is, the APM, the Associated Project Management, which is the framework that I've kind of been building for over a decade for myself, and building this kind of technical ability for project management. And really, like, the reason why I keep responding with that is because that's what I have invested in order to demonstrate technical ability to project management that I think is important to me, and something that I kind of didn't really know what the value of it would be, but certainly wanted to try and become competent in at least kind of 12 out of 29 areas. And kind of unbeknownst to me, this situation unfolded at a time where there was some change in the organization, and they just received a royal chartership. And previous to all of that, I work in civil engineering, which basically means you have to be a part of an institution in order to be recognized technically and to be recognized for contributing something. And that was kind of like, over 10 years ago, that's kind of like still the tradition. So moving into something that didn't have that kind of governance line, means there's some added effort into convincing clients what you're bringing. And so I really wanted to demonstrate to not only clients but colleagues as well that kind of comfort about what technical project management can bring to a project. So for me, that was kind of like my tool bag, was to go through the chartership process to then demonstrate what I'd been building for over a decade. And kind of what does that really mean? Well, in one aspect, that means having a laptop full of templates and information, like ready to go for the next project. And in other ways, that's kind of learning techniques about what to do in a situation. As I'm sure some of you might know, with risk, there are certain techniques that you need to have. And that can start to open up conversations and start to build upon, focusing how to collate data and how to then express that in a way that can be understood, and then can also be analyzed for the way forward. So kind of in the interest of this small intro and the time that I have, I just wanted to really talk about three kind of key aspects that will come up probably in discussion for today. So the first thing is about project environment, and that's very much the starting point for me. It's kind of a key component for success in pretty much every project that I've been involved with. And I think kind of the reason why I'm bringing this up is to then tie this into why the Nightingale was such a unique experience. For us, we were walking into an environment that was uncertain. There was a lot of uncertainty that the country was feeling, that the world was feeling. And kind of in times of those uncertainty, it can knock your confidence, and it can kind of, provide an alternative approach to the way that you might normally carry out project delivery. And kind of one of the key pointers to that was about, stakeholder involvement and how do people now view things. So very much like understanding that, okay, well, normally when you're in a project environment, you might have some time to carry out some analysis like PETL, and you might be able to have quite a long-standing view of the market, a long-standing view of how the economy is going, basically, and other aspects of that. And really, we didn't have all of that. We were kind of thrown together, really, really quickly. A lot of different consultants, a lot of contractors, and we had to make something of it. So in that environment, it's kind of key because you are either going to get people that are blockers and you're going to come up against certain challenges, or you're going to get kind of project enablers and, things are going to kind of move swiftly. But sometimes it might be too swift. People might be too eager. So I think it's important as a project manager to understand what kind of environment you're going into, and understand, by understanding that, you'll know kind of what's the framework in place. Is there one? Where's the leadership model going? So I think that's something that we can talk about today and run through. But really, really an important aspect of the Nightingale was that environment. We had a great environment to work to. Everyone wanted to kind of pull together, and that was like a massive benefit of that project environment. Kind of leads me on to stakeholder engagement versus the project objective. We had kind of 14 days to come together to basically make a bespoke outcome, and that formed part of our scope. So something that only lasts 14 days, you don't have the benefit of creating this RACI model, then understanding how each stakeholder is going to fit into everything. And so kind of going back to this idea of do methods still work in that environment? And yeah, they do. So part of the reason why I was speaking about it in that quick introduction about chartership and bringing everything together was I kind of had this framework already ingrained into me. And so I was able to kind of naturally bring that out in conversation and also bring that out in my analysis at the end of the day. So it still wasn't just a case of, oh, people are thrown together and we don't know what we're doing, or it's a unique environment, so you forget everything. It was more a case of actually, like, let's bring out what we've all learned over our careers, everyone with different years of experience and different kind of context of how to move things forward. It was a medical project, so you've got healthcare staff, there's operations which would be slightly different to construction operations. You've got basically people that want to look out for the patients, and then you've got an understanding of what to look out for in terms of materials that you can actually obtain and bring to site. Because remember, we were in a crisis situation, things had shut down, and so really trying to understand from your stakeholders what the wants are, but also recognizing the pressures that everyone's under as well. And then through that, you can kind of work out, okay, well, there is some kind of stakeholder mapping required, but didn't necessarily have the means to be able to write it down and the means to be able to express with a project sponsor what to do. And so very much trying to do it on the fly. But that method is still there and still really important to have. And I think, just being able to understand that there wasn't really a business case, but of course, someone's funding this whole approach. So there is a vision of what to happen. And it's kind of understanding that as a project manager that you might not have all the documentation formalized in every situation, but being able to revert back to a method of a project lifecycle, working out what each of the different areas of delivery are and each of the gateways, can then mean that, sometimes you have to pause and reflect, and then find out who's the right person to speak to, to then try and convey what might be within a business case. And because you've had that method kind of ingrained into you, you can then start to articulate things clearly to people in a very short amount of time to then continue with the project objective. The kind of final point is all about the governance. So, does it get in the way? Often when you're working on frameworks or you're working on something for a very long time, and someone comes along that's new, the governance can sometimes be seen as a barrier, or we didn't do that here on my last project, so why are you doing it here? Or, this is just a laborious way of doing it, or too much paperwork. But I think what was really interesting about the Nightingale project was the governance came kind of later on. And at that time where we were coming together and project roles weren't clearly established and defined just yet, it allowed for some innovative thinking to happen, which was good in a way. But then also it was really comforting to know that the governance did come along, and that actually it gave us a secondary check. And then, as a project professional, I think we should always kind of challenge that status quo. But it needs to be reasonable adjustments in my mind. And I think this experience really shows me that actually it's not a bad thing to continue to challenge if your professional experience and the collective professional experience can kind of display an adjustment, a way forward that might bring some benefit to it. And I think that's really important, that we understand the project management community, that we also need to educate our client, because this is what we're doing, this is what we're investing our time and our life into, is to continue to improve in this discipline. And so something that probably is good is recognizing fresh mindsets and experience, but also recognizing experience and trying to kind of bring them together. And that's pretty much what we did on the Nightingale. And having that space to create, with the medical staff, for example, was really, really important to us. There were a lot of mindsets where they would think one way about how something would be delivered, and then from construction backgrounds and consultancy backgrounds, we would have another, and it enabled a kind of way for me to say, hey, look, should we just workshop this? Like, let's just have a massive A1 print out on the floor, let's get our marker pens out, just go back to basics. And, here's a marked up drawing, right, it's on the wall. The kind of, usual project environment that you might experience would be, okay, well, the consultant is taking on all the liability. We now need to make sure that we've checked everything with the engineers. That can take a number of weeks. Then you've got to produce the drawings. You need all your governance. So you need your drawing list. You need to go through all your checks and approvals in place and your review period. And, then you might go back to the client again before you formalize that information. And really, we had the benefit of, actually, we need to get something done. We need to be able to demonstrate that we've thought about it and gone through that same level of scrutiny. We just did it in a more free-flowing way. And, throughout the discussion, I can kind of bring up a few more examples like that. But that's kind of, the three kind of main areas that I'd like everyone just to take from this discussion today. And, please ask me any questions in the chat, and look forward to the discussion with Scott and Martha as well. No problem.
Simon, one of the things that I found about the whole Nightingale, NHS Nightingale project, was that we actually managed to deliver something pretty much on time.
Yeah.
Was that a surprise?
It was, considering that, the procurement of materials was a major factor. I mean, at the time, there was lots of talk in the news about PPE and all the rest of it. But you got to imagine people were kind of stood down. I think it was for at least a week from memory before we then started to ramp up. And I can kind of remember walking through the streets of Manchester. It was just empty. It was just empty, and I couldn't really believe that we were about to ramp up a major construction project in the center of the city that, was pretty much vacant. So that was really bizarre. And then to kind of be, sat in this auditorium where, we're really kind of all just, picking up that this is something that needs to happen now. We were working with the British Army and other people, and they were really helpful in kind of making us understand fairly quickly that it needed to be a rapid response, and that actually you can do it. And it was nice to have the comfort from them that it was achievable. But yeah, it was a nice feeling when we got it done. To be honest with you, there was lots of happy photos taken but also recognizing that we all felt like it wasn't all smiles as well, because it was this major pandemic and we didn't know how bad it was going to get or not. So certainly for that first kind of week or so, it was quite daunting.
Yeah. How about you, Martha? Have you been involved in an emergency project like that, which has miraculously managed to deliver on time?
I have been involved in a few which are perceived as emergencies. I'm not convinced that they're actual emergencies.
Right.
Hey, Simon, I had a question for you around, the whole thing about project frameworks. One of my pet peeves with project management is the kind of unique use of the English language in a way that is kind of incomprehensible to anyone who's not a project manager. And presumably with this project, you had a whole lot of people involved who didn't have that kind of training and discipline and background. What sort of things did you do to kind of bridge that communication gap? Or was there any issue for you with that?
Yeah, there were some times where I suppose like everyone kind of wanted their say at one point. So there was a kind of melting pot situation, I guess is the best way I can describe it, where everyone was kind of working in silos. So you had, let's just say the bed, for example. The bed is the most important thing because that's where the patient's going to go, right? So in order to facilitate the bed, you've got all the infrastructure around it. But then you're also going to have the patient care around it afterwards. And kind of one of my first things that I said on stage was, the contractor is kind of the most important person right now, because they're going to procure the materials and they're going to build this thing. And if they say they can't do something in day one, we should really listen. And trying to kind of then bring the medical staff on board with that thinking rather than what it would have been traditionally, which would be the other way around, was something that I had to focus on, like right from pretty much like day two. I think the morning of day two was very much a sense of trying to convey that. And obviously it was met with some resistance at some parts, but I kind of just had to explain, this is the governance that we'd normally have in project management, but this is how we might need to adapt it in order to get to our deadline, because the time was the most important aspect that we had to meet it, because, we didn't know how things were going to go and how severe they were going to get. So kind of reinforcing that and then bringing that back to the governance to say, that's the decision you've made in your business case. That's the decision that you've made for this project, is that time is the most important thing. So that's sort of, every conversation we have has to be focused on that. But yeah, it was quite interesting. Even just talking about requirements management, there was a thing that we developed a log in the end, and it was really helpful because the administration staff to the medical staff were the ones that kind of really got that. And they said, oh, well, we've got something similar. We make decision logs. So something comes in, we have a decision log, and we do that. And I was like, oh, well, you're pretty much doing requirements management there and then. You're just calling it something different. So why don't you give me your document, and I'll kind of like amalgamate it into what we can use as a running guide the whole way through. And then that kind of formed part of our governance of like sign off, because then at the end we had like an audit trail of everything. So them knowing how to speak to people in a certain way that, you know, I would have just been cross-cutting, and they were like, well, there's actually a bit of a formal process we need to go through first, or, you know, you need to come to the meeting ready. And I was like, well, yeah, of course you would be prepared as a project manager, right? They're like, you need to be ready for the formalities of, you know, this is the way we discuss things, kind of press. And I suppose that's a really important aspect as well that I learned quite quickly. Yeah.
Yeah, so it sounds like it was not just about technical terminology from a project point of view, but also cultural aspects of the different parts of the organisation. It's a little bit similar, I guess, to people who work in universities. You've got the academics and you've got the functional, operational people. Quite different chalk and cheese, and I'm sure it'd be the same in the case of a hospital with the medical staff versus the operational staff. Yeah.
Yeah. We had some university people on board as well, and that kind of had a unique dynamic to it, because all of that conversation came up as well. Like, this is actually how, you know, someone from a university background needs to be presented with information. But again, you know, having I guess I can't really stress it enough, but having the different roles was just so valuable. And I mean that from an experience background, as in, not everyone had a defined role on the project, but them having a defined role in the real world, let's say, meant that when they were called upon, they could bring that experience. And because it was a bespoke environment, no one's experience was put to the side. So everyone kind of actually weirdly had an equal voice in the project, whereas normally they probably wouldn't have even been asked or consulted. Whereas in this environment, everyone was kind of consulted, right? Because you just needed to know what was happening at every stage, because everyone was coming together. You know, even operations, something you might hand over at a particular project stage. So for people that maybe aren't in this industry, you might design something, you might build something, and then you might hand over the operation. And it's very often the case that not one person would understand that thread the whole way through. Like, someone might not have intimate knowledge of how operations work, right? Or how facilities management works. But we had, you know, 2 weeks to kind of fully understand all of that and have it running, and also be there for the running of it. So as a team, it wasn't just a case of being able to just say, okay, we've done it, you drop it. It was like, no, we had that intimate knowledge. So, you know, we need to make sure that we brought all those people that were experts on board now to tell us the same thing as what I was saying, which is, you know, this is important for construction. They were saying, well, how do you get rid of waste?
Right.
You know, so you just be like, well, you just need to get rid of waste, don't you? This is but we're in a pandemic, and you know, it's not as easy as that. And we've got, you know, standards in a hospital, and now you're a hospital environment. So have you guys thought about that? So all of these things. So, you know, we were getting in the people that would actually remove the waste, and I'd say, well, let's just get them on board now and ask them. Okay, well, we haven't hired them yet. Okay, well, let's start the hiring plan now. You know, it's kind of all those things where you'd normally take a long process. And it was like, but we need them, you know, otherwise we're going to end up in trouble later on. So that's what, you know, was also a positive about it.
Yeah, and not just we need them today. Like, we can't have a 1 week contract negotiation. We need them today, because we've got 14 days to get this up and running.
Yeah.
So, Simon, I mean, that works for a really constrained time frame, right? Everybody's focused, everybody's available. That's great. And I guess what you're saying, it sounds to me that it resolves some of the problems that I see often in projects where they've got quite a long life cycle. There's a whole lot of passing the baton along through that project life cycle, and stuff just gets lost, right?
Yeah.
Particularly if you're not really great at following frameworks. So what are your thoughts around how you bring some of that experience into, I guess, a more BAU situation, something less urgent?
Yeah. I think what I try and say during project delivery is, like, focus on the objective, because that will kind of get rid of some of the baggage that you don't need. and kind of saying, but what does the output need, or what does the outcome need? So I guess when I'm saying outcome, I'm thinking more about the end user, and the output, I'm thinking more like the stage. So whatever the output at that stage is, and I kind of just break it down into each of those aspects, and then I say, okay, but in order to, deliver this, you've asked for this, but your priorities are kind of here, and like, what happens if we just focused here for a week or two, or did like a quick workshop, or just pick up the phone. I think the biggest aspect I've probably brought back to project delivery and also advising colleagues is just pick up the phone, call someone and say, I know where we are, but could we do this? Or just relaying where you're at, and the worst thing that can happen is someone could be mean back to you, I guess. But then, that might not be the first response. Like, that might not be the last conversation you have on the topic, just because something's come back. And I kind of try and have that confidence now, and try and give that to anyone working with me on the project, that might not be the last conversation. So like, let's just try again, or and that's kind of, I suppose, the single thing that I've brought to the project now.
And I think Martha, it's no longer this, is it? It's this.
Sorry.
Is that?
This is that.
Martha was saying that the new generation, they don't do that for the phone anymore. Which is that what you were saying? Because this is what I would usually do for a phone if I was,
Yeah.
Of a certain age, Scott. Of a certain age.
Of a certain age. That's right. That's right. Exactly. It does sort of like ding, 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 ding.
I know.
Oh dear. Anyway, okay. And in fact, I feel as though, Simon, you started to get into a concept of a flat organizational structure, which is probably pretty cognizant of Martha's concept that she wants to get across, which is about autonomy. And the flatter the structure is, you would sort of assume the more autonomy each individual has, right? So I can see how this is a nice sort of segue for me to then move us on to the next topic. So let me just move you into the soapbox. That's right. So I'd like to now introduce Martha, who is Martha and I frequently talk about projects and how these can bring out the best and the worst in people. She's got a pretty strong belief in quality project delivery and careful management of change. I think that's a pretty good, accurate description. She's a contract project manager, having worked for Panuku Eke in Auckland and New Zealand Post, among others. And she's going to continue the current conversation, but gear it towards the concept of the autonomy. So let me get you all lined up there. Thanks very much. Go for it.
Thanks, Scott. So kia ora tātou. It's good to be here to talk about autonomy, which is, I guess, a bit dry, but what I've been thinking about was autonomy in projects and really how much is too much. As Scott said, I talk a bit about project management, and this topic came about through a conversation with Scott. I was complaining there was far too much autonomy in local government, and that this led to all sorts of negative consequences in terms of cost and service delivery, but that it can make it a really fun and rewarding place to work as a result, because, hey, no rules, great. Talking to Scott, it led me to think a bit more about autonomy in project environment, and kind of like Goldilocks and the Three Bears, I was thinking, okay, well, what does just right actually feel like? And to be clear, I don't have any concrete answers to this, and I'm certainly not new in raising it. If you had a quick look at the internet, you'll see there's heaps of literature out there, and it's not unanimous. So I guess right now I was going to share a few examples and thoughts on the good and the bad of autonomy in projects, and I'm keen to hear the thoughts of others. So autonomy, what do we mean by autonomy? Essentially the ability to decide and direct your own life. And in the context of the project, that would mean the ability to decide your goals, your resources, your team. And you hear a lot about how important autonomy is in our working lives and in motivating us. And if you've done any leadership training, Along the way, you'll no doubt have come across Daniel Pink, who talks and writes a lot about this. People perform better when they're motivated, and to be intrinsically motivated requires autonomy, mastery, and purpose. So trusting and encouraging people to take ownership of their own work and development should improve creativity, drive innovation. So autonomy in projects would be great, right? But I think if you think about projects at an individual level and not in the disaster level where Simon's been working, they don't have a reputation for allowing much in the way of autonomy. There's rules and frameworks and box checking. It's highly regulated, highly controlled. I was asking a friend about autonomy in projects, and she's a project manager, and her immediate response to me was, well, is there any? And if there's autonomy, is there any accountability? How would that work? And I've seen a heap of examples where complete autonomy has led to really poor project outcomes. Projects with massive cost escalations, like design briefs flawed, no process to check those or sign them off, things that take significantly longer than the expected time frame, key stakeholders not brought on early enough, everything relitigated, no kind of clear decision points. Projects that have relied on great communication plans to paper over the fact that a whole lot of the key requirements are not being met. I just read about a great example of this the other day. It sounded like there was a heap of technical project jargon being used to share good news, which meant that no one spent much time looking at what wasn't going that well. For anyone listening in Australia, this sounded very much like a utopia storyline to me. Great, go Rhonda. In my experience, throwing away all the rules isn't that helpful, I guess. And it's definitely not agile. I don't know how many times I've been told that. We don't need to do this. We're agile. When I was thinking about autonomy, we were thinking about the topic. I guess my mind was firmly in the frame of autonomy as the individual, but then I got thinking about another kind of autonomy, and that was the kind of project as a standalone unit, entirely autonomous from the business it works on. I guess the Nightingale project is a bit like that. Large projects can be assumed to have high levels of autonomy, but I kind of wonder how true that actually is, and if it is true, how desirable it is and when it might work best. Because establishing a standalone project can be great for creating a really expert and highly motivated team, really focused on getting the outcomes, and it can have an organisational culture that's really different from the parent organisation. A project I worked on recently was set up in this way, and it developed a culture for being a clique that just didn't work that well with the rest of the business. But the project in itself required a really significant change for people. Like much of the workforce needed to move from a really manual to an automated environment. The project would significantly impact the entire network for this business. It was a kind of central point in a whole new way of working. And the relationship between the business and the project just wasn't strong enough to support the level of change. And I think in part of it was to do with the inability of the project to connect well with its key stakeholders and to explain what it was doing. Frameworks and templates really meant little to the business since they weren't an effective way of sharing what was going on. I recently read some research paper that said projects which are better integrated with their surrounding environments and more successful. And, given the level of organisational change in that instance, I would strongly concur. But that interface is really hard to get right. And, you walk that fine line of integration with maintaining that project talent. And part of the reason that talent was there was to drive new ways and cost-effective ways of doing business. And, you do risk losing them. And I was thinking about that autonomous unit, and I think it probably works better on sort of infrastructure projects. I'm thinking big project alliances. But I've also experienced some alignment issues there where, in an infrastructure-based organisation, the operational team initially define the problem, and then design and delivery, that gets lost along the way, and the final solution is handed back, and they're like, that's not really what I needed. So I guess in short, there's no easy answers. But being clear on who needs to part with you in the change is really critical, and the right leadership fundamental. So I guess that's the autonomous structure. But back to the individual, if you're given full autonomy, you deliver in a way that gave great outcomes, right? But I think it depends, doesn't it? I bet you've all seen examples where projects delivered great outcomes, but those outcomes didn't actually match the business objectives. Per my introduction, I've spent a bit of time working in local government, and you see it often. Great initiative, huge passion, resulting in a service that well. Another agency already did it. There was no funding to maintain it. It wasn't really core to the business. Now it's almost impossible to exit because, you know, the original community group who wanted it, hugely vocal, very politically engaged. So you're stuck with these things. Happens quite a lot in physical assets too. You know, a department that creates parks are not the same as the ones who manage them. So too much autonomy can result in kind of unhelpful and expensive outcomes. Or the other thing that happens with too much autonomy is people stand still, right? They're caught in the headlights. My father-in-law used to be a police officer, and he has this great story that he likes to tell of the day he attended a traffic accident with a truckload of live chickens that escaped onto the road. He was absolutely astounded to see this chicken trying desperately hard to get back into the cage it had just been ejected from. I guess that story offers a few sobering thoughts about animal welfare, but the point is that actually, to a degree, we're all chickens and we like a level of certainty. So I guess no matter what your thoughts are about autonomy driving performance, I think right at people's basic needs is you still need some security and safety. Because if you're thinking of Maslow's hierarchy, at the bottom of that pyramid, including safety and security, that's what supports the higher levels like fulfillment, which is a great driver for motivation and performance. So some level of certainty is really going to be important. So I think on reflection, after I've gone through this whole process, I think that actually the rules and frameworks do help to improve autonomy in the sense that they ask you to be clear about requirements so you know what needs to be delivered and can get on with it. They ask you to be clear about who makes decisions and on what basis those decisions will be made and how those decisions can be changed so we know who we're checking in with. Essentially, they're providing us guide rails so that we can go faster by taking away that noise. But I guess that cage needs to be fit for purpose. It needs to fit our needs. And finally, another view of autonomy, which I'm not going to dive into, but I think it's worth a mention. And that's if your ability to participate is compromised by factors such as your age, gender, or ethnicity, then your autonomy is going to be really limited and your ability to deliver value is going to be constrained. So I'm going to stop talking right now, but I'm keen to hear thoughts and experiences of others. Over to you, Scott.
Oh wow, that's given us more than enough of autonomy to chow down on.
Sorry, you gave me the talking stick though.
I know, I did indeed. No, that's good. I wondered, is there something here, and did you come across it in your research or your analysis, something called controlled autonomy? Is there something that exists like that? I just wonder whether that's the missing bit or whether that's actually the bit you were defining when you talked about structures.
I think it is, Gillian. That is controlled autonomy, right? It's the guide rails, surely. It's here's the minimum things that you're going to need to do to keep going, and that's kind of what you're going to need to go faster. I know. I have to confess, I didn't do a lot of research, Scott. I was really reflecting on my own experience.
I don't know. I'm sure you mentioned a few papers that have been written or something. Simon, when it comes to autonomy, it sounded like when you were describing your project, there was a lot of autonomy at a certain point. Like it was a wave, so there was a lot of autonomy to begin with, and then there was governance that came in, which maybe then applied that controlled autonomy afterwards. But then, having said that, I feel as though when you went in with your knowledge that you had recently gained from that sort of like structure, you were actually introducing a form of controlled autonomy by doing that, right? Saying, I'm going to be autonomous to put some structure. Yeah? What do you reckon?
Yeah. It makes you sound like a bit of a control freak now.
It does.
Are you a project manager?
You are, yeah. No, I like to think that I'm probably not. Yeah.
That's right.
I think there was that really. It's funny because there was still aspects, probably not like a whole lot that I can say, and probably kind of a bit cagey, but there's definitely some examples where, you know, although I was quite autonomous in the approach, there were other times where it was like, this person is an expert, you know, and they're saying that something needs to happen. And we've got people saying, oh, not sure. And it's like, this person is probably the only person that can actually, you know, pull this off. it might have been literally to get a wire from one end of a building to another, and they're saying to you, this is how I need to get it done, and you're there and you're thinking, well, if I have to go and explain all of this, how am I going to get this done? Or if I have to go and explain, um, this is the process in order to get a change through the door, moving one cable literally from one side of the room to another because we've agreed something, or can I just trust that individual knows what they're talking about because we've been through it, and then do an update in the meeting? That was kind of like something that would happen, and I think in another environment that would have been stifled completely because we just wouldn't have done it. The risk reward would have just not been worth it. And you can. I'm sure, Mark, you've seen that loads of times where someone's come up with some kind of innovative idea or something that's just like a bit blurry, but would still work. They've got all the experience, and they're just kind of stifled because you just can't do it. There's loads of reasons why, but you just can't do it. And we were kind of fortunate in that because we had the timeline, and there was an element of we've just got to get this thing done. That kind of unlocked it. But I think I was just thinking about, Martha, you were talking about individual autonomy, and something that I've noticed is there's still a big onus on the value of one person being able to do it all. And one thing that I've kind of been trying to instill recently is there's just too much now, and I've always wondered, in sport, the team is kind of valued, and you get like a couple of individual stars or whatever, but the team is kind of normally valued. And sometimes in framework, it's like that gets disbanded first. and then you're sort of looking,
aren't you?
who's this individual that's carried all of this knowledge? And I'm kind of always thinking, wouldn't you want to focus on a team, and by the team? So I don't know if you've seen that as well, like that it's always been this kind of individual, who's the best individual to put into this rather than who's the best team.
I think that's a bit of human nature, isn't it, though, to pick the winner, not necessarily look at the whole team.
Yeah.
But you can see that when it works really well, right? You get a really great gelling of individuals coming together, all pointing in the same direction, and you get a lot of done. It's a great working environment. Everyone knows where they're going and loves it. And introducing, I guess, a different kind of personality and different ways of working can really disrupt that. I think that comes back to my thing about it really doesn't matter what it is. Great communication and leadership is going to be necessary for anything that you're doing. Like the ability to take everybody with you, that whole lead from behind and get everyone pointing in the same direction is really critical. And I was reflecting that I guess that, the less experience you have, the more structure you're going to need. Because you don't have those life skills around you. So all those, frameworks and tools and rules are incredibly helpful when you're starting out. Not, sticking in one organisation necessarily or one industry, but just having that toolkit.
I think we can see that as well in the industry because people are developing a lot quicker and being given more senior roles quicker as well. I can remember kind of just getting to the title project manager, was something that you would need to be well past mid-30s before someone was going to give you that responsibility. And now it's like, within 3 years of graduating, you can kind of get that title on a project. And I think that kind of has come around because of the frameworks and the fact that you've got a guide rail, and you can then demonstrate other abilities because all the other stuff is already there, and you don't need to kind of bring it bespoke to every project all the time. And so that's probably been like a good thing in that respect, because you can, I like to say, it's like upskilling. You get to focus on the other bits now. I just feel like we're still lagging a little bit we probably haven't quite captured that benefit and then moved on. But yeah, I think once we do, that would be really interesting. I was just going to ask you as well. Obviously, the projects are normally about some kind of change, and one of the things that we were discussing with a colleague the other day was, I've just got so much change control, so much change control to do. And then I was like, your project is all about change. So, you have to get used to change. As a project manager, you have to get used to it and manage it. The conference that Scott and I were at, someone was talking about change management. So they go to businesses now, and there's now certification, and there's organizations that you can align yourself with. I just wonder, have you ever seen, or are you coming across more increasingly, that aspect of business hires people to guide them through the changes that they're having, but then you've also got the change management on a project, and kind of those two meeting at all?
I guess thinking about where I'm working at the moment, there's change coming from everywhere, and it's coming from all the time, and I guess it's thought about in lots of different ways and framed lots of different ways, and so it's incredibly confusing for people, right? There's no one change, there's no one way that we do that, and everybody's got, I think the thing about local government is it's sort of turned in on itself, and it's this endless go round of business improvement.
Yeah.
So you've got people like myself who's come in to support through various changes, and then you've got local teams doing it, and they're doing it differently, slightly different frameworks, methods. I guess the environment has got very confused for people, and then and then there's the other improvement aspects of change. Like, we want you to be great leaders. We're going to push you through all this training and change the way that you're doing things. And guess what? Every year we're going to do a different business planning process, because every year we weren't quite satisfied with it. So, I think that I'm a fully signed up member of the business improvement team, but I think for people it can be really unhelpful, right? Which is imposing so much when there's a heap of change in the world anyway, and some of it's possibly quite unnecessary and could be a lot better aligned.
Yeah, probably having some autonomy that's already been there existing help, I suppose, deflect some of that change, and kind of then say, actually, we need to kind of wait a second, or at least think about what this is bringing, and is it right for the project objectives, and then kind of moving forward.
Yeah.
Well, even the anathema, though, of having someone external come in and assist with the change within your organisation to operational procedures, that just doesn't seem to be right. Who's going to understand the organisation better? Someone who's come from outside, or someone who's already in there? And I'd be really skeptical and say it's good, because then we can blame that organisation that it didn't work, because they came in from external to the organisation. But then I could also say, well, maybe the people internally just don't feel confident enough that the change is going to be the right change to do, or that they don't have the authority enough because there are the existing hierarchies and they can't pick up the phone because that person's never going to pick it up when they try and call. You notice I'm using the phone like that.
But you could sit on two sides of that spectrum, right? Because part of it is being into the business. You'll know it best. You'll know what needs fixing best. You'll know the best way of fixing it. You'll know the key people, because organisations are complex. And to Simon's earlier point, is some people will be the expert in that one thing, and if you're embedded in an organisation, you'll know how to navigate that. But being inside the organisation, it's an awfully noisy place, and there's a lot of doubters who will say you can't possibly do that. But if you come in from the outside, it doesn't take long to go, well, that thing's crazy, and that thing's, and let's wrap a project around that. In fact, your scope is way too narrow for the things that you want to achieve, and your benefits aren't going to be delivered. So why wouldn't you bundle those two things together, which you're not going to see if you're really embedded in an organisation?
Yeah,
I think
that's true.
There's a concept of called tiger teams that come in and often will kind of literally bounce and then try and they're all there saying, yeah, well, we've seen this across loads of different companies, and we understand, they interview you, you understand where you're going from. I think the biggest thing that they miss, and something that's not captured, is the emotion that you're spending, because if you interview people, you're taking like quite personal aspects of them. And I think that they never tie that up at the end. And so people don't really appreciate that the next time they come across a team like that, people might be disinterested. And I think often what I've seen is, especially when, um, I joined, I suppose, the civil engineering industry when I was about 23, and there was a massive age gap. I don't know whether it's just the offices that I was working in, but there was a massive age gap between, because there'd been a recession, between the hiring at the time of graduates. There wasn't really this constant intake of graduates like we see these days. It was very much like 23, and then it felt like 43, or 38 was kind of like the next age boundary. And a lot of the experienced people were kind of in their late 50s. And I think a lot of people didn't appreciate the kind of time in service aspect of just being frustrated with things that were changing. And then people would discount the value of like spending a little bit extra time, because they didn't appreciate the emotional value that they probably extracted from them over time. And so, yeah, sometimes the autonomy, I guess, is like a good crutch to take, to say, actually, that's a little bit of, the people that are experienced telling us maybe what we should be looking out for, but kind of using some of that enthusiasm, I guess, to change a little bit, like adapt. I think I use the word adapt because I think that's probably what we're trying to do, is just adapt things a little bit, not
Yeah.
wholesale change is probably a better way of looking at it.
Oh, very good. Look, I'm going to have to wrap it up here, guys. So thanks very much. For those who have registered, a link to the recording of this event will be sent along with a request to provide us with feedback. So feel free to share the link with others. We look forward to seeing you at the next event. We're going to have Clive Furr from Auckland talking about managing high-risk infrastructure projects. Thanks for coming. We look forward to seeing you at a future event. Ka te whanau. Cheers.
Ka kite.
Thanks, everyone.
Ka kite.